What's up, sports fans? This is the Lucas Ross Sports Channel. We continue with our 2025 predictions for the upcoming 2025 college football season. Up next is the Baylor Bears. Of course, Baylor coming off a very surprising season last year in 2024. This is a team that went 8-5 last year, so they were kind of a quiet, sneaky, 8-4 type team in the regular season, and then 8-5 overall if you do count their bowl game loss at the end of the year. But this Baylor team came off a pretty solid year, so this is a team that's getting a lot of hype heading into next year in 2025. My thoughts on this team before we get into the predictions for this upcoming season. I think this is going to be a pretty solid Baylor team. You look at both sides of the football. Sawyer Robinson returns at quarterback. That's obviously the big return news there for this Baylor team, and they got a lot of weapons on both sides of the football. They still got some playmakers like they used to have and everything, and also they got plenty of experience, and they also added some pieces in the transfer portal. So yeah, I like this Baylor team a lot. I think this is a dark horse team in the Big 12. I do have a couple of dark horses that could make a jump this year out of this conference, and that probably is Baylor and probably Texas Tech. But let's now get to the schedule here for 2025. This is the schedule for Baylor. Again, this team was 8-5 last year in 2024. So let's go game by game, and I'll give you my official prediction for this Baylor team for 2025. And they're actually going to kick things off on a Friday night. They'll play Auburn at home on August the 29th. This is going to be a big non-conference game to start out the year for both of these teams. You look at Auburn, the difference here between these two teams. Auburn's coming off a disappointing year last year. They're trying to turn things around and trying to get in the right direction under Hugh Freeze. Last year, they were one of the best 5-7 teams because they just lost so many close games. So the Tigers are trying to turn things around. While on the other side for Baylor, they have a lot of experience coming back, and they're getting a ton of hype. And not a lot of people are talking about this Auburn team a bunch, but I think Auburn's going to be a little bit better this year. Baylor obviously will be definitely like a really good team. So yeah, these two teams I think are dead even in my opinion. But Auburn does have a pretty good offense, so I probably would give the offensive advantage to Auburn, but I would definitely give the defensive advantage here to Baylor. I do like Baylor's defense a lot, and this game is on a Friday night, so it's kind of a tough one to really pick here. I kind of been back and forth on this game. I'm not really trying to go with the home team and everything, but I think Baylor, you look at this team, on the offensive side of the football, they definitely have plenty more experience at quarterback, but Jackson Arnold is a pretty good quarterback there for this Auburn team. We'll see how well he develops here for the Tigers. I mean, this game could pretty much go either way. It could be a shootout, it could be one of those low-scoring defensive games, or it could be one of those games. Here is how I think it's going to work. I think Baylor's going to probably run the football in this game, and they're probably going to just waste the clock down and keep that Auburn offense off the field for as long as possible, and I think that will be enough. So I think they'll wear down Auburn's defense, and I think Auburn's just got so many question marks on the defensive side of the football. I think they'll be quite better, but not really quite better, compared to the last couple years. So I think Baylor gets the win here. I think it's a close game, but I think Baylor's running game will pay off, and I think they will win this game. So I'm going to say that Baylor gets the win, and I got the Bears starting off 1-0, and then they play a road game at SMU on September the 6th. So they play Power 4 teams to kick off the first 2 weeks of the season, and I think they're going to split these two games. I think they beat Auburn, but then lose to SMU here the next week. SMU is a team that's going to be pretty good this year. I mean, this is a team that could probably get back to the ACC championship. I wouldn't be surprised, though, if Baylor did pull off an upset here, but just because it's on the road, that's kind of a tough one to make a prediction here. If it was at home for Baylor, I would definitely choose Baylor to win this game, but I'm going to go with SMU to get the win here. So I'm going to go with SMU to beat Baylor, and that gives Baylor their first loss of the season. So that puts them at 1-1, but then they beat Samford here at home on September the 13th, so that puts Baylor now at 2-1 going into Big 12 play the rest of the way. After that, they open up Big 12 play against Arizona State on September the 20th. This is a big game to open up Big 12 play for both of these teams. The Sun Devils, they have a lot of production coming back on both sides of the football as well. I feel like Arizona State definitely should be the favorite to win the Big 12 this year, but this is a wide open conference. Anything can happen. An upset can occur anytime in this conference. There's a lot of parity in this conference as well. or maybe like a lot of priority and maybe a lot of parity in this conference. But yeah, Baylor is playing at home in this one, so you're probably expecting me to pick Arizona, or pick Baylor to win this game. But I've already done my Arizona State video, and I already picked the Sun Devils to win this game. Not just because they're the better team, but I just do trust their coaching staff, and I also trust Sam Leavitt a lot at quarterback than Sawyer Robinson. So I'm actually going to go with the Sun Devils here. Even though playing at home, I think Baylor is going to be competitive in this game, but still, I think the Sun Devils will win this one. So I'm going to go with Arizona State to get the win. So that puts Baylor now at 2-2. And then after that, it's a road game at Oklahoma State on September 27th. Oklahoma State is a team that's coming off a very terrible season last year. Just don't know how good this team is going to be. I know Mike Gundy can probably turn things around for this team, but still, this is a Baylor team that I think their experience will pay off, and I think Baylor gets the win here. So I'm going to go with Baylor to go on the road and beat Oklahoma State. That's a very tough place to play. I wouldn't be surprised if Baylor probably did slip up here, but still, I'm going to go with Baylor to get the win. Next game is at home against Kansas State on October the 4th. This is another one of those big games here for Baylor. I look at Arizona State and Kansas State probably being the biggest couple of games on their schedule, and they both get them at home. And let's say they probably split them. I think they'll probably split between Arizona State and Kansas State. I think they're at least going to beat one of these two teams, and I think they do beat Kansas State. Again, Kansas State is also a well-coached team. I mean, they do got plenty of good production coming back on the defensive side of the football, but so does Baylor. So I think this is a low-scoring defensive game. It really kind of comes down to whoever you trust at quarterback, and it also kind of comes down to whoever has a better running attack. But Baylor is playing at home. I think they get the win here. This is a big win for them, and I think they improve to 4-2 with this win over Kansas State. They get their first bye week of the season before playing at Cincinnati on October 18th. A lot of people think Cincinnati is going to be a little bit better this year. They could be possibly a bowl team. I mean, I don't really necessarily agree with that. I mean, I just don't know how good Cincinnati is going to be. Maybe they're a little bit better this year, but, the talent is just not there for Cincinnati, and it's not really good as a program as they used to be. So I think Baylor goes on the road and beats Cincinnati. Plus, the bye week does help them out, so I got Baylor getting the win, and that puts them now at 5-2 on the season. After that, they play a back-to-back road game trip. They'll play TCU the next week here on October 25th. TCU, I think, is going to be a pretty solid team. I don't know about them being a dark horse team in the Big 12, but they're usually right there somewhere around being a dark horse team at least every year in the Big 12. So yeah, this is a tough place to play here for Baylor, and I think they probably split here between these two games, Cincinnati and TCU. I think they're going to lose one of these two games on the road here between Cincinnati and TCU. I think they beat Cincinnati because they get a bye week before playing that game, but then they go back on the road. It's really tough to win back-to-back road games in the history of the Big 12, so I think Baylor slips up here. I think they lose to TCU in a pretty competitive game, a low-scoring defensive game, so I'm going to go with the Horned Frogs to get the win. So that's Baylor's third loss of the season, and then they get to the month of November. They'll play a home game against UCF on November 1st. A UCF team that's going through a coaching change. Scott Frost does return here for this UCF program. Kind of hard to tell how good this team is going to be, though, because they have a lot of new faces on the roster, and I think Baylor also bounces back. So I think Baylor gets a much-needed bounce-back win, because if they had to play a tougher opponent, they probably would lose the next week. But I think they beat UCF anyway, so I think Baylor gets the win. They improve to 6-3, and then they get their second bye week before playing Utah at home on November 15th. You look at the last couple of matchups between these two teams. They met as non-conference opponents, but this time, for the first time ever, they're meeting as Big 12 opponents now. This is a Utah team that's coming off a pretty disappointing year. I don't really know how good Utah is going to be, and that's kind of the same thing for Oklahoma State. These are two teams that I picked to probably, win the Big 12 last year and go to the Big 12 championship, and these two teams were just absolutely disappointing. And with those two teams, disappointing last year, it's kind of hard to tell how good these two teams are going to be. So I think Baylor actually gets the win over Utah, and also they get a bye week, and they kind of, figure things out what they did wrong to Utah last year in those last couple of matchups. So I think Baylor gets the win in their first ever Big 12 conference matchup against Utah, and then they play Arizona after that on the road on November 22nd. This is an Arizona team that could be a little bit better this year. They're coming off a pretty disappointing year last year in 2024, just being 4-8 overall, and they were not really close to being a Big 12 championship contender. A lot of people think the Wildcats are going to be a little bit better this year, which I can see them being a little bit better, but I really don't realistically know how good they can be. But you look at this game, I kind of had a really tough time figuring out what's going to happen in this one. I kind of been back and forth on it, and like I said, playing on the road in the Big 12 is never easy, and also this game is out west, so yeah, Baylor's going to have to travel like a little bit of far distance, so I think that probably will come into play in this one, and I think that's probably going to cost Baylor a little bit, and also playing a physical Utah team from last week, maybe they're a little bit beat up, so I think Arizona actually pulls off the upset here, so I think that's probably the one game where Baylor probably does slip up, and it's probably going to be their worst loss on their schedule. But I got this Baylor team losing to Arizona on the road. That does drop them to 7-4, and then they close things out with Houston at home on November 29th. This is a Houston team that I think will also be a little bit better this year. Willie Fritz having his first year, it was a pretty disappointing start, but second year it could be a little bit better for them. They got Connor Weeman coming in, the transfer quarterback from Texas A&M. Maybe he provides a spark for this Houston offense. And then this defense could be pretty decent as well. But playing at home, I think Baylor does bounce back after a loss to Arizona from last week, and they get the win to close out the season. So I got Baylor finishing 8-4 in 2025. I think that's a pretty well-respected prediction. I mean, I could see this team probably going 9-3, at best, and maybe they can probably go 10-2. But I don't know if I see this team winning 10 games, but it wouldn't shock me if they did win 10 games. It would definitely shock me if they were to somehow win 11 games at best, but I got this team going 8-4. 7-5, maybe that's somewhere in that range, but if they go 6-6 or not make it to a bowl game, that's going to make it for a disappointing year, in my opinion, for a Baylor team that's expected to do a lot this year. And like I said, this is a dark horse team and possibly a top 25 team for upcoming 2025 for this Baylor football team for this upcoming season. So that's my prediction for the Baylor Bears for 2025. Do you guys agree or disagree with this prediction? And give me your prediction for this Baylor team down in the comments below. Thanks for watching this video, and stay tuned for more sports content videos on my Lucas Ross Sports YouTube channel.